Okay, let's make sure I'm on there. All right, great. I want to thank you for attending our Tridium talk. This is about the JACE 9000, where we added Wi-Fi to the actual piece of hardware. So with that, um, we are sharing. A little housekeeping. We are recording this. We'll post it to the Tridium.com under the Tridium talks as well as onto YouTube. So you can view them there. There is a question and answer button on your screen. My Lloyd will actually be helping answering those as we speak. I'll look at them at the end because I can't do two things at once. So Lloyd is systematically engaging and focusing our web services. This is pre-AI. Okay, so just let you know. All of these questions will then be posted later. It usually takes us a couple weeks to go through them, and then we post them on the Tridium Talk site so that you can get access to those. So what are we here to talk about today is the new JACE 9000 with Wi-Fi. For those that like the too long didn't read or too long and can't wait, this is going to sum it up, right? It's the JACE 9000. It's going to have 415 running on it because 415 is what supports the Wi-Fi chip on the JACE 9000. It supports Wi-Fi 5, which goes all the way up to the AC network. It will actually have a factory image of 415.0.130 for those that need to know what that image is. And our data sheets have already had this information. So this is just a matter of waiting for us to put the components on the board and start manufacturing and get the certifications, which you'll all see in these slides. So, like I said, the docs, the sales sheets already have had this. We've known it. Actually, when we introduced the 9000, we talked about how it was going to have a radio. The big thing you'll see is that when we designed it, we knew we had to put an antenna on it. So our engineers actually created one enclosure and one motherboard, which I'll actually show you a little bit about. So we didn't have to worry about creating a new device. We just reuse the same components and pop out tabs here and there. In fact, if you looked at the door of the 9000, you would actually see the upcoming spaces that we needed to let the LEDs for the new Wi-Fi radio and the Bluetooth button show. So again, the engineering of this was we knew this was coming. We needed to design it so that it was one motherboard, and I'll show you through that, right? So just because how do you introduce a Wi-Fi and show you that, hey, there's some signals, it now is wireless. Now I'll show you that there's two things that are important. This first picture is the motherboard without the Wi-Fi chip and the antenna. Why this is important is this is two separate SKUs. The 8000 actually had the Wi-Fi stuff populated, and then we, at the factory, disabled the firmware. Customers have asked us to have the hardware removed, especially if it's in the government. So we now have one motherboard, but depending on the variant that you buy, like the 03, which is the one you're buying now, it does not have those chips populated. And then if you buy the Wi-Fi version, the chips and the antenna is populated. So that's a very important note in this, is because this was a big ask from some of our customers, is that if they don't want Wi-Fi, they don't want to have the radio on the board. So little picture of the board. If you haven't looked at the 9000, that is a giant heat sink, and that's why we have what I call, well, I call them the turbo vents, but that's the processor heat sink that we needed to put on there because it's a faster processor. So those are the two spots that I was looking at. If we look at comparison between the 8 and the 9, because that's pretty much what you're going to be comparing it to, we have a single core processor in the 8000. We have a quad core processor in the 9. I'm going to talk about what's happening with 415, but QNX is the operating system on the 8000, and I'm kind of doing a preamble to why 415 is important to note in the slides. And then we're using a Linux core on the 9. There's memory, there's SD card sizes. We don't need to get into that. The big thing here is the Ethernet's a little faster on the 9000. It is generation 5 for Wi-Fi, so that picks us up to AC on that. The other thing I'll note, and I'll get into some detail, is the 8000 had a switch to turn Wi-Fi on and off, an actual hardware switch. We're doing that in software on the 9000, and I'll show you how we added some of the flexibility with that. Again, Wi-Fi is a separate SKU, so if you order it without, even when you ordered an 8000 without, you couldn't enable that. It was factory disabled. So you still had a different SKU, but the parts were still on the board. Here they're separate, and I want to make that clear. Debugging port is micro USB versus Type-C. So those are kind of the comparisons, the specs on that. Getting way in front of my picture. Here's a bigger one. So this is the front panel. You'll notice that there's 2 LEDs. Only one of them works right now, and I'll explain that, but there is a Bluetooth radio that we have in the chipset that we have not taken advantage of. So we're actually looking at what potential use cases there are. So if you press the Bluetooth button, you can press it all you want, and that light will never work, and the radio will never fire up because the firmware doesn't have the connections in there to turn that part of the radio on. The Wi-Fi button, I will explain a little bit of what that does on the 9000. So when I talked about a physical switch, we'll compare the 8 and the 9. So in the 8000, there was a dip switch that you would actually throw to tell it was in client mode or access point mode, and then it was off. So in the software, if you were looking at Niagara's workbench, or you were looking at the components there, you would see that the switch was non-selectable. It just told you what it was set at. Now in the 9000, we've converted that over to a software switch, and we've added some more functionality, which I'll explain here. But that is that dip switch is no longer on the actual JACE product like it was on the 8 software, but we have the button underneath the hood. So what does that mean? How does this work then on the 9000? So you'll see here in this diagram, I've got something called, or this picture here is an access point controlled. So if you use the 8000, you know that if I throw the switch to access point and nothing connected to it, it timed out. It would actually turn off. And so in order for me to enable that again, I'd have to go throw the dip switch back and forth. So here what we've done is we're giving you actually an extra mode. We have this access point controlled, which will work with the timer and the button. So if we look at the hardware, right, I can assign, or when I go into access point controlled, it now watches that button. So if I press the button, Wi-Fi access point will pop up. I can use it. I can connect to it. As soon as it goes idle, it shuts down. I can hit it again and it starts back up. So I have that flexibility, or I could actually tell the system I need it to be in client mode or I need it to be in access point mode. Okay, and I'll show you where that timeout is if you've never used the Wi-Fi, you're probably going, what is this? But it is an interesting setting. So how you configure this is just as you would expect. It's in the platform. There's Wi-Fi configuration. You're going to activate it. You're going to tell it what mode you want, and you're going to go discover the Wi-Fi networks that you want to attach to. So nothing's changed there. I will tell you, I put this in because I've slipped and fell. Part of being a technical person is I try things out and move them around, and our beta testers also have told us this, but it's not that bad. It's just a little slip in that sometimes I don't read dialog boxes. And so on the 9000, when I enable it, it's going to ask me to reboot. And then it's going to come back and say, hey, what did you want it to do? And if I changed it from off to client, it's going to want me to reboot. You don't have to reboot, as I found out, and as the beta tester. So we actually changed the documentation to kind of call this out, because at first I'm like, well, I had to reboot twice just to get it to go. So enable it, put what you want, reboot. Why it has to reboot is because we need to tell the Linux core that the radio is now active. So there is a reboot in that process. And then once it's up and running and you're in client mode, you can go and pick the networks. But I put that in there just to plant the seed so that you won't do something like I do, which is I thought I had to reboot every single time when I had an option of saying, hey, no, do it after. By the way, when you're in the debug and you're in the command window, do the same thing. You don't need to reboot every single time you make that change. Get everything set up, then reboot. One other little slip that I made, and engineering had to help me out, is that when you look at a JACE 9, it has two Ethernet ports. And a lot of our customers, in fact, the majority of the folks that I talk that use Wi-Fi use it in this method, that they use the Ethernet to put the JACE on the backbone, and they're using the Wi-Fi to augment some functionality, whether it's a display panel outside of a box, and they have want to connect to the access point of the JACE so that they can show Niagara diagnostics on the panel so I don't have to open it, or adding a sensor here or there. You need to understand that if I'm using the wired network, what happens when I activate the Wi-Fi radio. And so we have a setting, which I completely ignored and glossed over until I figured out why I needed it, why I couldn't access the actual JACE. So the little caveat here is that we have this ability to say that, hey, when you use Wi-Fi, go ahead and pull the gateway configuration from the access point, right, through DHCP. This is important to note because if I have that checked, I'm not going to be able to get access through the Ethernet as I expected. So if you see this configuration, is because I'm running it in my office and I connect to that JACE across Wi-Fi, and then I'm augmenting the capabilities through the Wi-Fi radio. So Ethernet, I actually want to use the settings in the TCP P configuration versus having it automatically set and use the Wi-Fi configuration. So this is just a little thing to remind you that when you deal with multiple networks, you have to kind of step back and think how you're going to use those networks. And so we give you the option of configuring either way. At home, it's checked because I wanted to pull that at home. So at home, I have it connected as a client to my Wi-Fi network to actually get the JACE on the backbone. Okay. So, and the same selection of the SSIDs, things of that nature, that all works the same. So if you're using the 8,000 to the 9,000, they're exactly the same. I will call out that on the 9,000, there's less max clients. This is due to the actual chipset that we're using in the 9,000, although I don't think that will be too big of an issue. And then I'll just call out, this is where that timeout thing is. So on the 8,000, if you didn't want your Wi-Fi access point to turn off ever, you had to actually move that 10 minutes to 0. So, I slipped and fell on that one several years ago. And then this one, again, with the button, it makes it much more easier. It's more flexible. So sometimes our customers will use the Wi-Fi in a lab to configure them and commission them. This gives you those capabilities. So I'm not going to get into part numbers, but I will tell you there is a different one. So there is a 03, which you guys have been purchasing today. So the only thing we're adding is we're putting in for the 9,000 the same country Wi-Fi devices. And I'll get into that in the next slide. But there's an 01 for the US, there's an 02 for worldwide. We actually had to create a new Wi-Fi SKU for the EU. More and more countries are becoming like the US, where they don't want to allow you to select channels that aren't within their approved components. So we've had to group a couple things together so that we can lock those down so that we can get country certifications. So that's why you'll see a new SKU. We aligned them so that they're the same as the 8,000. So what does this mean? You're on this TridiumTalk. We're talking about this new Wi-Fi variant. I'm hinting at 415. What does all this mean? And so we are in the process of this week publishing, actually for this and probably into the middle of next week, the actual price list that will include the numbers that you will be able to order. We are in process, meaning we're waiting for the paperwork for the worldwide for those two countries to actually confirm that we've been approved. So you'll see that the US one, we've already got that certification. So once we get quantity, we can begin to ship. For the worldwide and the EU, we're just pending that paperwork. So there will be a delay on actually being able to ship those until we receive those, kind of dotting our I's and crossing the T's for that certification for Wi-Fi for those countries. It's already gone through UL testing, so we know we pass them. We just have to do all the paperwork. So these are the launch countries. So these are the ones that you should expect to be able to sell into. More will be added as we update the firmware, because there are some countries that we can add to this when we update the firmware for the Wi-Fi radio. So there's more to come. This is typically how the 8000 was too. There's a set of stuff, and then we bring in more and more countries as we see the demand for those. This is just right out of the documentation. This just shows you how they're different. You'll see the US has 2 or 3 channels that they don't want supported, and in the UK or the EU, they have those supported. So all that is that we have to comply with how countries regulate their frequencies. And so these are batched together so that we can sell them into those countries and be certified. Okay. So since the documentation was already created, we've updated it to add the Wi-Fi verbiage of that new SKU. So there's a shipping guide that's up there. A little trick I learned, we don't have the best search for these documents on our website, so I'm constantly talking and trying to get that improved. But if you sort by the year, you'll be able to actually see the twos or the documents that we've just changed relatively recently. And so you'll see the data sheet changed and the shipping guide has changed. So that's all available on there. The other interesting thing is that we've been asked over and over by our customers to decrease the amount of paper inside the box. So we are now going to, so that the Wi-Fi will be the first to have this one sheet, and then the 9000 will actually get it because it's the same product. But this will allow us to do is use a QR code that will bring up the actual install sheet, right? So instead of having all of that in the box in several different languages, here's several different languages telling you how to get to the install sheet. You can use your phone and be able to bring that up. Actually, you can do that right now if you really want to try it. And what's nice is they've made sure that that document is on the Tridium site and not on the docs.community site. So you don't need a password or anything to get into. It will actually render that on your phone or whatever device you were using. So keep that in mind. That's what it brings up. Again, that QR code is live. If I'm kind of stalling, if you want to bring out your camera and try it out, you can. It will work. And we have several others that are in the deck to do that as well. All right. So in planning all of this, okay, what does this mean? We want to look at where we are with the JACE 8000. So we've actually sent out a notification to let you know that this was something that's on the horizon. When you install, or let me say, it's not install, the JACE 8000 will not let you install Niagara 415, which is going to be announced in a week or so. It will not let you install that if the JACE 8000 radio is enabled. Okay, so what does this mean? The 8000 will not allow that to update, mainly because QNX doesn't support that version of the radio. Okay, so we've made it so that we can't, you won't run into a wall where you're not going to hurt yourself by accident. You install 415, it sees the radio is enabled, it actually says, hey, you can't do that unless you disable the radio, okay? If you disable the radio and install 415, don't worry, just factory reset it, and it will go back to the factory version, and you'll be able to restore radio on the 8000, okay? So I'm just kind of mapping this out because it is I don't want to say a issue, but it is something you need to be aware of. And that was something that was out of our control when QNX decided to drop that support. So what we've done is we've extended 4.14 so we can carry it on into 2026 to help that transition if you're trying to take something that's already in place and move it over, but just be aware that this will happen. Okay, so now if I'm a big picture person here. So if you look at all of the Wi-Fi, right, here's kind of a support plan of how the current software works across all the devices. So I will note here that the JACE 9000 will still come from the factory with 413U3. The JACE Wi-Fi will come from the factory with 415. So those, we will keep the 413 on the 9. The Wi-Fi version will get 415 because it needs the new Niagara version to be able to understand that stack under Linux. Okay, so 415 becomes the long-term support for both devices. If you don't use the radio, it extends that out. If you use the radio, you need to be aware of that. You'll need to stay with 414 for a little bit. All right, so this is kind of weird, right? We're talking about the hardware because we're beginning the manufacturing process and you need to know it's available. So I've kind of talked a little bit about 415. There's going to be another Tridium talk on 415 and we'll deep dive into that. So I had to kind of let you know that it's coming because A, it's going to be on the device as it comes from the factory. So we need 415 for that support on the 9000. And I also wanted to let you know that 415 with that QNX update is it doesn't support the radio on the 8000, but there's some cool things in 415. More to come on that. My favorite is the PX editor because now I can use Niagara Remote and get in there and actually change PX pages. You'll see other cool things like the web or the Fox over WebSockets. Don't get too excited on that. It's pretty cool. It just means that we'll use 443 inside the network to start to communicate from 415 to a supervisor. The other thing that I'll show you, see, I get so excited about 415, I'm actually going to pre-announce it, right? I'm giving you all the thing, but we do hash the passwords these days in 415. So that's a security best practice little thing. Emily has done a great job of putting up a document on things you need to think about when you update. And so that will be out there. Stephen wanted me to show you the roadmap for 415 on when you should see the drops. So it's, once a quarter, you'll start to see those updates. If you're looking at when we're going to announce, there's the 26th. U1 is scheduled, so is U2. So you'll see, you just kind of look at that timeline. And again, we'll have a whole Tridium talk just on 415. Resources, so we have a resource, our Niagara documentation, so anything in Workbench is also available online. When you're looking for recordings like this will be recorded, there's a Tridium Talk button now. We used to have to go to the events, and so now there's a Tridium Talk. Then it will list all of them that are posted, or you can do a search. Essentially, you'll see the two. I've got one tonight for the APAC region, and then the JACE 9000, which lets you register, will then become active where it will have the recording. And again, this is a place you want to come back to because if we have the Q&A document, which we will post, it's going to be there. It's not going to be under YouTube or anything like that. So Niagara Pro Tips. I'm glad to say that I can put more pictures of other folks up there. So here is the whole gambit of the SEs that are now creating Niagara Pro Tips, and they've got a lot that they've just put up there for the cloud. At Tridium/videos is the shortcut, or at Tridium for those recordings. There are some new case studies that we want to just let you know. So there's a lighting integration, a water management integration case study. We've got one up there for a data center and one for a regional bank on their operation, their NOC. So there's some great case studies to go up there and read about and learn about how our customers are using Niagara. There's another university that are using the open backnet protocol. So there's got training on that. And then there's another ice plant system. And those are fascinating when you look at how they control ice plants with freezing something at night and then using the ice in the day for these water systems. So again, we have another case study up there for that. That QR code works. It will take you to the case study on the site. So you'll see all of the case studies, not just the ones that I referenced. So you can go ahead and scan that, or when you get the recording, you can hit that as well, or just go to the tridium.com and look at those websites. So just to kind of close out, these are reminders because the dates are up and coming. So there is an enterprise SMA that discount that we extended to June 30th. 2025. So keep that in mind if you're interested in that. That QR code will take you there and give you that ability to get that discount. There is a customer loyalty program that is active that has been extended to June 30th of 2025 of this year. So keep in mind you have an opportunity for that program in place. There's also a hardware discount. So it's kind of like a bulk on the JACE 8000s. That has been extended to March 31st. That's coming up pretty quick. So considering that's like the end of the month here, which is a few weeks away. So keep in mind that that is there. You can take advantage of that. There's also, we've had a lot of conversations around SMAs and how we can tie some of the cloud functionality. So we actually have a cloud SMA for the Niagara Cloud Suite. So you can get an SMA along with the functionality of the cloud all bundled into that SMA. So if you're interested in that, that is available as well. So that is a rather detailed conversation on, hey, the JACE 9000 now has Wi-Fi. So you got a little in-depth view of the boards, how they're manufactured, what the potential SKUs are, some little tips on setting them up. And what I'll do is I'll kind of look over here for some of the questions that were answered. So Lloyd's been doing a good job of answering those questions. So some of the ones that we kind of pull through to see what we have here. So, all right. So some of these are kind of interesting. So could we use a small solar panel? So this is one of those things where you ask questions. I don't have enough context to be able to answer them on Modbus. So you're going to have to give me a little more to answer on that. Somebody sent a question on the certification of the technical and the sales team. So we will have the slides that I have here. The engineering team has those. The sales team will have those. Those will all go out. We can help you look at what you're trying to do on that certification, and the training department also has those slides. So as we look at hardware and things of that nature, we can address those through those decks. And let's see, where would we need to use Wi-Fi? That is a loaded question, and that is one of those questions where I asked several folks last year, because we were doing a survey to see how people use it. So I see two use cases that I got from customers. I use it at home for a small job, so I can add my JACE to my Wi-Fi network, and I don't have to worry about running a wire to it. That's not the best solution when you try to look at enterprises. So usually you want to use the Ethernet ports to be able to do that. The other example I thought was very cool that customers were using is they use the Wi-Fi. Let's say you build a panel and you put the JACE and all the other electronics in there and you close it off, and you wanted to do some sort of Niagara interface about what that's controlling. So let's say it was running a chiller plant. You can use the Wi-Fi radio to go to one of these Wi-Fi tablets or these HMIs that folks sell, and then that puts the interface on the panel. And it's just a browser, and it's just using the Wi-Fi to access the JACE. It's still using the PX pages. So I thought that was very clever on how you reuse that. And then some folks are using the Wi-Fi to actually connect some sort of IoT sensor that they have that's on a Wi-Fi network that they want to be able to connect to. So there's various reasons why you'd want to use it. It's not a replacement of a Wi-Fi access point like a professional one. It's just a convenience. And again, we have folks that will commission JACEs with the access point. So they'll hit that button, they'll connect to them with the default IP addresses, and then they commission them. Like for a job, I might have to do a couple, 30 or 40 of these. I can use that in a lab environment to get those things commissioned quickly. So if you have new ways of using the Wi-Fi, I'm all ears. I would like to know. So let's see. Will there be a variant of the 934? That is a great question. I can't answer that, but I can get back to you on the Q&A on that. I know that right now there are the parts that I showed you were by case. You can, later on, we'll show you on the price list that there are variants where you can buy it with or without. Let's see what else. Mesh configurations. So if you look at our antenna, we're a single antenna that you can use, out of the box. We are not MIMO. We don't have the ability to do 2x antennas and then choose the hardest signal. Usually the mesh networks involved with the access point, we're not into that. We have actually third parties that put Niagara on devices that do support those mesh networks, and they connect to all of them. So there's a solution for Niagara to do that out of our box with the Wi-Fi that we have. It does not. And then we have a primary gateway, right? So that was what I covered. So this person who asked this probably came a little late. We can, there's a switch that when you set up on the default gateway on the Wi-Fi that you could either use what comes to it from the client or the actual Wi-Fi access point, or you can uncheck that and use what is configurable in the LAN. So that's a lot of questions, and I think that kind of wraps it up. All the questions we didn't answer, we will answer those and put those in the Q&A doc that will be available on our website. So I want to again thank you for taking some time out of your day to watch this Tridium Talk, and it will be recorded, and you can have access to it probably in a few hours, and then the Q&A, give us a couple weeks, and we'll get that answered. Thank you.